Meanwhile, the Willis Report is next.
Have a nice night. We begin tonight with news that the federal government promises it will respond in kind to the hacking of Sony pictures. The FBI today officially blaming North Korea for that hacking, and President Obama this afternoon saying Sony made a mistake in pulling the movie The Interview. With more on this, former White House Chief Information Officer Theresa Payton and Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and now Senior Fellow with the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome to you both. I want to start, though, with some breaking news we have just moments ago crossing on the AP. Staples announcing that they had an exposure of customer data. This was previously announced in October, but only now are we getting real details on this. 1.2 million customer payment cards may have been exposed in a security breach. And in fact, information exposed included names, payment card numbers, expiration dates, card verification codes. This is just one of many retailers this year who lost data to hackers, data belonging to Americans. Theresa Payton, your reaction to that tonight?
I'm not surprised, but I'm definitely devastated, both for the company and for the customers of that company, because here we are, peak time of holiday travel, holiday shopping, and now they're going to have to get new cards reissued and deal with the inconvenience of that.
Well, Theresa, though, this is another layer of severity in my view, because, you know, before we heard some instances where people's email address would be the information that is exposed. Tonight is something far more serious. It's the card numbers themselves, expiration dates, the card verification codes, everything you would use to use a credit card over the telephone or remotely. This, to me, seems to be more serious. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree, Gerri, because you're right. Now they've got all the information they need to use every channel, whether it's online, telephone, or creating a counterfeit card that has all of this information on it. So basically, these cyber criminals hit the jackpot with this one.
Hit the jackpot. That sure is true. Ambassador, I want to turn to you, and I want to turn to the president. Comments today regarding Sony. Really interesting comments from the FBI. Let me read those. The FBI will identify, pursue, and impose costs and consequences on individuals, groups, or nation states who use cyber means to threaten the U.S. or U.S. interests. That's the FBI response to what happened to Sony. They are blaming North Korea today. Ambassador, are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised. North Korea has been accused of cyber attacks on South Korea. It's obviously worked with other countries, quite possibly Iran, possibly China, to build up its cyber warfare capability. I just say this about the FBI response, and this may well constitute this attack on Sony a criminal violation in many respects. But, you know, the FBI is not the first line of national security defense. If this is indeed an action perpetrated by the North Korean government, I think we have a national security issue here. The Obama administration has said as much, and while I'm thankful the FBI is involved, I wish them all good luck. What I'd really like to know is what the Department of Defense is prepared to do about this. Well,
that is a great question, and my response to this, my reaction was, can the FBI handle this? Who is the FBI in an international problem of this nature? Theresa, you have said that you saw the U.S. attacked every day when you were the White House CIO. What's your response to this? And should the Department of Defense be involved, as the ambassador just suggested?
Yeah, I agree. This is one of those things where, again, we need to be measured and make sure we really understand who's behind this. Is it state-sponsored, or is it a cyber extremist group under the direction of state-sponsored? We don't know that. That's still under investigation. But the fact remains is that this was a war on American soil. It just happened to happen in the cyber domain, you know, something we can't see. We can see tanks invading Ukraine from Russia, but we can't see the cyber domain. And so if, in fact, this was a government that was behind this action, even if they hired hackers to do this, we need to get political leaders together around these countries to talk about this and say this cannot stand.
Well, I have to tell you, it's very serious, right? Don't we have something like 30,000 soldiers on the border of North Korea? We don't have normalized relations with this country, as far as I know. Ambassador, I want you to respond to what the president had to say today about how we might respond. Listen to this.
We will respond proportionally, and we'll respond in a place and time and manner that we choose. It's not something that I will announce here today at a press conference.
What do you make of that? Is that the right tone?
Well, certainly it's not something he should announce at a press conference, but honestly, if we conclude this was directed by North Korea, I think our response should be something more than proportional. I think what we want to establish are structures of deterrence so people aren't doing this to us. And it's another aspect that worries me about apparently giving the FBI the lead role. I don't view this, at least as far as we know now, as a law enforcement matter. Law enforcement's the way the president sees the terrorist threat. That's wrong there, too. We need better thinking about what constitutes warfare, what constitutes intelligence gathering, what constitutes theft, what constitutes vandalism in the cyber world. As Theresa said, it's different. We may understand that in the physical world. We don't understand it in the cyber world. And that kind of thinking has to develop to know how to respond. But let me just say it again. If it's North Korea, I don't want to respond proportionally. I want to make sure they never try this again.
So just to be perfectly clear here, Ambassador, it sounds like you are saying that we're not being strong enough on this, that we need to be more emphatic in our response, clearer in our response, close the door on
absolutely.
this.
Well, I would go beyond that. Last night, I suggested that we put North Korea back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, not for the cyber attack as such, but for the threat to attack theaters that showed the movie. They were a state sponsor of terrorism before. They should be again. I guess I'm happy to say the Wall Street Journal is reporting today even the Obama administration is considering that. There are a lot of steps we could take, and I think we ought to be looking at all of them.
Theresa, at the end of the press conference, the president made a quick aside to the need for more regulation of the internet. It's the Wild West out there, he said. And a lot of people like me sit back and say, kind of the last thing I want to see is the government regulating the internet. But is there a case to be made in the case of all this cyber terrorism, all these problems, that there needs to be some kind of safeguards?
Well, there are a lot of safeguards already in place, and they didn't stop this Sony attack. And I'm with you, Gerri. I worry about hearing more government regulations on the internet. Part of what makes it so resilient and so innovative and creative is it's open. And so I think what we have to do instead is create a protocol between the government and business where we talk about practicing digital disasters on this level of calamity. You know, we did drills all the time at the White House. We do drills with our clients today. But I have to tell you, doing a drill like this extensive, this depth of success in hijacking a company, holding them hostage, physical threats, we have not practiced disasters like this before.
Well, no, it's new territory, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And Ambassador, before you go, I just want, it's hard, you know, I just feel like we're just not having the conversation we need to have about North Korea. If this is really what happened, shouldn't there be tougher economic sanctions? I mean, isn't there something we can do, something we can announce instead of sitting on our hands and saying, tisk, tisk, boy, that internet sure is the Wild West?
Yeah, well, regulatory structures are not going to protect us from North Korea. I mean, I think there are a number of economic steps we could take. I think we ought to have a more robust offensive cyber capability than we do now. And I think we've got to take steps with China, which may or may not have been in league with North Korea. China,
Good
you know,
point.
the Chinese Communist Party is very close to North Korea.
Right, and there were some handprints, some fingerprints on this that seemed to suggest that China was involved. That was the initial reporting, but today the president denying that they had any evidence that China was involved. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Theresa and John, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Really appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that Sony hack attack taking center stage at President Obama's